Hello. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Monday Magic and Marketing. It's Christina Quick, the Tarot Biz Mentor. I'm just going to get us pinned in the right location. I'm happy to see everybody today. Happy Monday, whether it's the morning, the evening, or in the middle of the night for you. Let me know. If you are here, let me know if you can see and hear me okay. Welcome to episode 2. So, we are continuing on in this series of Magic in Marketing. Last week we talked about, well, we launched the podcast and we really talked about embracing your inner rhythm, right? So how to find your most profitable and productive working times. And we also talked about some of the mindset shifts that you might need in order to start working a schedule that really makes you happy, right? So I just want to check in briefly with everybody. If you looked at your schedule from last week's recording, how did that go for you? Did you work a different schedule? Did you start on your logbook for managing your daily energy, seeing where your energy's at? Did you notice maybe some certain times of the day or maybe some days of the week that you're really productive? So, going back to that and keeping up with that practice, I think is important. Okay, it seems like everybody is here, so let's go ahead and get started on today because we only have 30 minutes. So today we're going to be talking about how to unleash your authentic voice. And I want to start a little bit first by kind of talking about the journey that we all sort of go through, right? When we're thinking about starting a spiritual business and why we even start a spiritual business to begin with, really getting back to those roots. So, why do we even start a spiritual business to begin with? Well, there is a process, and you might call it Kundalini awakening, you might call it enlightenment, you might call it nirvana. It just kind of depends on God's grace. It just really depends on, what religion, what's kind of spiritual lens that you have to start with. Now, for some of us, deciding to go along on a spiritual path is definitely a personal choice. Some of us, it's just a choice that we have made. It could be a calling that you feel very early on. It could be a very early on calling, and when you're a teenager, you might have thought, "Oh, I want to be a nurse, or maybe I want to." Um, be a psychologist. Nursing and psychology is like the two industries that really overlap with ours a lot. I would say also like fitness, health and wellness, that sort of thing. But any type of like holistic wellness sort of based business really overlaps with the psychic industry a lot. And I think it's because we want to, ideally help people. And that's kind of what we're trying to do. But there's this whole process that happens before we can really get to that point and before we can actually start making money in our business, feeling that we're not an imposter, right? Beating that imposter syndrome. That's a really big one. But also being able to be our most authentic selves, right? So in the beginning, when we are going through these motions, a lot of us will experience what's called the dark night of the soul. The dark night of the soul is that point where we're going along in our life and something takes us off our uh, ideal trajectory of where we think we're supposed to end up, and that has so much to do with has a lot to do with your family's values, the culture that you grow up in. That could be many different types of culture: the ethnic culture, the religious culture, the environmental culture, and a lot of what we feel like we are supposed to be doing is meeting up to a lot of outside expectations and a lot of outside standards, right? And when we kind of break away from this is when we go through what's called a dark night of the soul, and it kind of knocks us off that trajectory, right? And we start to think, oh gosh, maybe I'm not so sure of everything. And a lot of the times there's going to be signs and symptoms that a dark night of the soul is impending. And it really the biggest thing that really stands out when you're going through a dark night of the soul, or you're about to go through the dark night of soul, is you reach this point in your suffering, right? And so we try to find that source of that suffering. So that's pretty much that first step that we do. And we kind of call that shadow work now. It's called shadow work. But what it really is, it's us sort of uh, breaking away from the path that we thought we were supposed to follow, right? That we thought was already predestined for us, already laid out for us. And we start to remove ourselves from that. And we start to question our beliefs. We start to question our motives. We start to question our own intentions. We start to question our expectations, right? And so that is like that entry point where shadow work kind of starts to come in. And a lot of us have done a lot of our shadow work, right? Especially shadow work around money. If you are trying to run a spiritual business and you're trying to reach a certain income level, doing your money mindset is just an integral part of this process, because we have a lot of warped ideas about money. We have a lot of limiting beliefs about money. And, it all comes back to deservingness. And that's something that I teach in my courses. Pretty much all of my courses, there's always going to be some level of shadow work involved. And it's all around the idea of deservingness. Do I deserve this? Right. And it's so insidious. Hi, Svetlana. Good to see you. Hi, Diane. Good to see you. Thanks for coming in, guys. And it's really so insidious because money is such a good thing. Money is such a good thing. And, I could literally sit and talk for hours about why we think the negative things we do about money. But, I'm not going to spend too much time talking about that because that would take forever. But what I am going to talk about is the fact that there are some core elements to healing your deservingness, and that has a lot to do with healing certain wounds that you might have. So, why do we do this? Okay, so let me tell you a little bit about one of my big wounds, right? One that was really just like a boulder in my path, and I could just not get over it. Okay. So, all my life, I have experienced an abandonment wound. So, abandonment mainly through the masculine line. I had an absentee father. I didn't have a masculine upbringing at all. I was raised by a single mother, and I had these unconscious programs where I would continually attract boyfriends who were kind of mirror images of my father's behaviors, which were very neglectful and very narcissistic, right? And it was one of those things where not only did I attract men, but also just when I really took a step back, I was almost attracting like everybody that had some sort of karmatic link to abandonment, right? So some relationships early on might have been trauma bonding where I have a relationship with a friend who also experienced that, and so we have this trauma bond, right? And then you get to a point where you start attracting partners, life partners, and men or women, you start attracting life partners that are mirrors of your deservingness. So deep down in my subconscious, in my core subconscious, I had a learned behavior that everybody that I love will abandon me, right? So I went through the first half of my life, and really probably the first third of my spiritual business, with the expectation that people are going to abandon me one day, right? And so I would do this thing where it was like a program that I was playing out. It's a response, it's a reaction to that, right? Where I would play out this thing where I had to I was so critically hard on myself that I had to know everything about everything, And I had to constantly prove my value and prove my value and prove my value because really what I was saying is, love me, don't leave me, right? And so how that really changed for me was I realized that no matter um, how much value I gave, and this kind of really crossed over into business as well, because I was that person that would do $25 tarot readings, and I still deal with it today. But it would be $25 tarot readings, and I would spend hours upon hours writing the most amazing tarot analysis, and I'd literally be making like $3 an hour. And I'd be doing all this because I was like, just love me, right? Just stay here and I will give you everything you want. Just stay, just don't leave me. And it wasn't until I really started doing shadow work around the masculine and feminine wounds that we carry. And I realized, oh, the reason why I'm such a people pleaser, the reason why I'm such an over giver, the reason why I know that I'm good at what I do, but I have issues making as much money as I know I'm worth is because I'm operating from this level of everybody's going to leave me anyway. And then it started getting into a point where it started bleeding into client attraction with me too, because then I would be like, not understanding why people weren't purchasing. And it's because I'm running this unconscious program of please love me, please love me, please love me. And it comes across as neediness and clinginess, right? So that's just one example of how our masculine and feminine wounds can do that. And then, the most obvious feminine wound that I think that a lot of us have is being, especially other women or people who identify as feminine, is being able to trust other women. That's what we call the evil stepmother syndrome, right? Where you have, for me, it was my grandmother who did this to me. She messed me up pretty good, but it was my grandmother that taught me, that women are constantly in competition with one another. And so for the longest time in my life, I viewed other powerful women or other powerful people, just people in an authority figure, as dangerous. And so when I would be doing my ideal client work and I'd be working on my niche and things like that, and I'd be like, I really want to work with these amazing people. But every time these amazing people would come into my life, I would reject them. Again, that's the abandonment wound coming into play. And I would talk myself down about how this person's so much prettier. This person's got their life together. This person doesn't seem to have any issues. Why would this person want to work with me? Right. So that could be a reason why you're not attracting the clients that you really want to work with. It might be because you have some masculine and feminine wounds kind of going on in the background. And it could be, a way that you are repelling and rejecting and abandoning these things. And then, so another part of that, and this really comes up a lot in when I do client sessions, and I'd be like, I have these clients that are like, and I go through the same thing where, yeah, evil mother syndrome. Mine was abusive on all levels, and there was a lot of subconscious jealousy there. So, and I'm sure, Diane, that completely affected your relationships for the first at least half of your life, right? It really affected your ability to create friendships and to be able to trust other people, and be able to trust your own clients, right? That's a big thing. Yeah. So we're all dealing with stuff. And so we go through we go through this process of ego death, right? And that's really what I want to talk about is ego death. We realize, okay, this is the source of my suffering. Another reason why how a masculine woman can kind of show up is I have brilliant people in this group in the Profitable Psychic Academy. They are brilliant. They are so smart. And sometimes if they have an abandonment wound, what they do, and I know from experience because I did this, is they would build up this business and then it would start making money and they'd be like, oh crap, this is real. And then they would reject it before it could reject them because they don't believe they don't believe that they are deserving of that money. So that's another reason why if you have a lot of abandonment wounds, masculine or feminine, that you may be one of what I call a build and destroyer, right? You keep building businesses and destroy them. You build, you destroy. You build, you destroy. And really what it is it's an effort for our ego to protect us from possible rejection. As things are starting to go good, that doesn't feel right. And so we panic and we press the big old red stop button and we disappear, right? So as you're going along, you're learning all of these things about yourself and you're trying to heal yourself on a personal and interpersonal level, especially with, just relationships and people in your life. But then trying to build a business on top of that is even more difficult. So we go through shadow work, shadow work, shadow work, shadow work, and we go through it and we're constantly, every time we find a limiting belief, every time we find a wound, we want to fix it, give it some light, give it some healing. And that's what most gurus teach, right? Most gurus, spiritual mentors are going to teach how to kill your ego, right? Because um, we have this idea that when we're born, that individuation when we're born is a very easy concept because we're just naturally born with that. Of course, I'm an individual. I am who I am, right? And then individuation, it kind of leads to suffering when we compare that to like societal and cultural expectations because in a society, in a culture, there is no individuation, right? Individualization, there isn't any. So it's an illusion. It's like one of those first masks, those masks that we kind of take off and realize, oh, as much as I think I'm an individual, I'm not an individual. I just started another round of shadow work when my dad got really ill and died, and now finally I'm getting started back on that journey again. And yeah, I understand that a lot. And you may even find that it's easier to do the shadow work now that he's passed on because you're no longer afraid of maybe what he thinks or any judgments on that part. Even if your father loved you tremendously, our parents are not perfect, right? Even the best parents traumatize us in some way. So and there's times and seasons to doing shadow work, and shadow work never really actually goes away. I'm sorry to tell everybody that. I'm sorry to burst anybody's bubble. It never goes away. There's always going to be, and why is that? It's because, well, it shapes our brain. It literally shapes our brain in a different way. It makes our brain think in a different way. So first of all, we are, any type of trauma we experience, it literally changes the dynamics of our brain. And so, we kind of we can't really fix that, but we can come to some sort of understanding with that. And so we get to that point where we're like, okay, I understand now. I understand that I understand my place in the universe. I understand the bigger picture now. And I've healed myself to a certain extent. So now we're like, okay, if I've managed to do this and I've managed to alleviate some of my suffering and find my purpose, really align with my purpose, then I wanted to help other people do that, right? And that's what I think what we do as empaths, professional empaths, professional intuitives, professional, highly sensitive people, psychics, whatever you want to call it, it's kind of all the same thing. Is we want to help other people alleviate their own suffering, and we want to help them come to the same understandings that we did. And so we become kind of like these guides, right? So we become a guide on that path. And we want to be able to do that in a professional capacity where we can actually earn a living and attract abundance to our lives in all shapes and forms while being able to heal other people, right? Um, it's interesting because once we get to a certain point of enlightenment, we go depending on how you want to look at it. A lot of us use the chakra system where you go up through the chakras and you have the Kundalini awakening of the serpent going up through the chakras, or if you work within the tree of life, Jewish mysticism, you can do the path working through the tree. Maybe there's maybe some Norse people here who go through that version of the tree of life. So whatever, a spiritual tradition that you kind of lean into there, what it all is it's a path working path, right? It's a path working journey. It's to get you from your most mundane self to your highest version of yourself, your most spiritual version of yourself, right? And so you're going through this path work, and a lot of spiritual mentors that I've noticed, they don't teach you how to get back down the tree. They'll teach you how to get up the tree, and to kind of release all of these limiting beliefs that you have, understanding your place in the universe, understanding what is duality, right? Understanding contrast. Contrast, Abraham says, is really just there to show us what we don't want, right? It's there to notice and say, actually, um, so an example of contrast in your business might be, oh, I don't want to work with people one on one. Okay, you know, maybe that's a part of contrast that you don't want to deal with. So then you figure out, you formulate another way to work within your business. Maybe you start teaching classes or you start doing group sessions or something like that. There's always another way, right? And so coming back down the tree is where you start learning marketing, where you start building up your self confidence, and where you start to first learn how to use your authentic voice, right? Because if you're coming down the tree, you want to remember too, you're coming down from the crown chakra, then you have this enlightenment where you're connected to source. You start having these mystical experiences. You start having mediumship experiences. You start being able to get into a trance like state. You start being able to shamanic journey. You start being able to do magic without candles and magic without all of these, herbs that you need and stuff like that. Your magic becomes instant. And it's, you get to the point where you don't need all these tools to manifest anymore. You can just do it with your thoughts. But now that we've experienced what we call ego death, and now we realize, oh, well, I am just one drop in this sea of spiritual businesses out there. I have to relearn how to talk about myself and I have to come back down to the 3D. So getting up to the 5D, it's one of those things where getting back down where we live and operate and run our successful business, people aren't trained for that, right? Janie, thank you. I appreciate that. So coming back down, right? And you learn how to use your psychic abilities. Your psychic abilities are on tap. You don't need cards anymore. You graduate from using tools. So the next one is your throat chakra, right? Your authentic voice. And as we're coming back down the tree, it's almost kind of like we're a blank slate. Like we do all this ego death, ego death until we like kill every single negative part of ourselves, right? We kill them very theatrically. And then now we have to resurrect ourselves. That is the mystery of Christ consciousness, that resurrection. Okay. It's in lots of different, spiritual religions and mythologies previous to Christianity. But I'll say Christ consciousness because I think most of us understand it, understand the collective information, the collective feeling behind Christ consciousness, right? Where you kind of ascend, you come back. And so you're this blank slate, right? And if you're not careful, you can really go crazy. That's why people say don't do Kundalini unless you're prepared to go insane. Because once you've made it to the top of the tree, once you've made it to the top of the enlightenment pillar, your view of everything will change. It will never be the same. You will not ever be the same person again. The way that you look at things, you will be, it's like when you stand up on there, you're able to take yourself out of the lower realms and you can really see everything for what it is, right? And you realize that things simultaneously matter and they don't matter at the same time. And I think that's why people go crazy because they realize at the top of the tree is nihilism, is nothing. It doesn't matter. It's just here. It's just right now. It's up to you to figure out what you want to do with it, right? So I needed to transform some things before deciding to purchase your second bottle. I was like, no way, I'm a coach. And the reality that I was really being a mentor anyway struck me. Yeah. And that's so true, Svetlana. That is so true. Absolutely true. And we all kind of operate that way, but we try to downplay it, right? And it all kind of goes back to deservingness, right? So that's a really good insight. That's a good insight. And so we're kind of like this blank slate. And so now it becomes a matter of how do I rebuild myself up? Okay. I've killed myself. How do I rebuild myself back up? Well, we have to identify our value system. I think that's the most important thing. When your business is based around your value system, using your authentic voice becomes so much easier because you're sure about yourself. You're sure about what you believe in, right? And so some of the things that might be important to you are what I call your isms. When you're coming back down the tree and coming back down into 3D life, the third dimension, you have to define what are going to be your parameters for this life. How do you know you've lived a good life? Just like how last week I asked you guys, how do you know you've had a good day? What is it? What is the itemized list? How do you know? Well, okay, let's take this a step further. Not just how you know you had a good day, how do you know you've had a good life? And I think it boils down to speaking out for your values, making a case for your values. You realize that you are a voice. Yes, you're just one voice out there, but there are so many people out there that need to hear your voice and they need to hear your experiences. They need to know what you've been through and they need to understand that the way that we are confident, so you might be looking out on someone on YouTube or me, maybe you're thinking about me as a person, right? And you might be thinking, wow, that person is really confident in what they say. They don't feel like they're wavering at all in how they feel about something. They're very matter of fact about it. And you can tell that people put a lot of energy into their business based on their values. So, for example, one of my values is that everybody deserves a livable wage. Everybody deserves the ability to use their God given talents and gifts in order to create an income and abundance for themselves. So, that is one of my core beliefs. That is something that I will not waver on. There is no way that I would ever think anything differently, right? So when I'm creating content or when I'm creating courses or I'm thinking about coming in live and hanging out with you guys, that is always at the forefront of my mind. And I'm always wondering, how can I express this in such a way? So your one of your isms might be that everybody deserves the opportunity to explore their spiritual gifts and develop their spiritual gifts without judgment or fear or consequence from that. From people who maybe think that it's not correct or not right or something. Maybe you're an intuitive development coach or a psychic development coach, and maybe that is your ism that you know you've lived a good life if you create content around that belief, right? So, one of the things that I would love for you guys to do is think about your industry, whether you're in psychic development, whether you're in health and wellness, whether you're a tarot card reader, whatever it is. I want you to get out a piece of paper, make a list of all of the things that people say that people can't do in your industry. Okay. So if you're feeling brave, type into the comment box right now. What is something in your industry that people continually say that you can't do? I'll give you one for tarot readers. Tarot readers aren't psychics. If you're reading cards or you're reading tools, then you're not using your psychic abilities. What are the limiting beliefs in your industry? What have other people, your peers, what are some really crazy limiting beliefs that people have said about your industry? Now, how can you create content that challenges that? And that to me is using your authentic voice. It's about Yeah, it's about how you talk to people. It's about being able to communicate efficiently and that sort of thing. But really, where the authenticity comes in for me is where I'm challenging the status quo. And that's where it becomes the most authentic because it's no longer about me. It's about everybody else. Those limiting beliefs hurt and keep them from exploring their own gifts, their own abundance. You can't make a good living doing tarot readings without working long and crazy hours. That's a good one. So maybe there's some content there about how that is untrue, that you can authentically voice your opinion and your life experiences about. And when you come from your own experiences and your own victories, and that you talking about things that you have manifested, then there's that confidence there, right? Be male. Yeah, that's a big one, Casey. That's a really big one. Masculine or male identifying people in the tarot card industry, they are like 5%, maybe 10%. And there is a long history of discrimination against males for being into spiritual work. So, for Casey, maybe there's some content there about what is the true value of being able to connect with a masculine facilitator. What can they do for you that maybe another type of facilitator can't? Why is it safe? Um, Creating content around your authenticity, right? Also charging more. Yeah, that's a good one too. For sure. For sure. So this week, I really want you guys to consider, instead of doing cards of the week, instead of doing TikToks, instead of doing what I call clickbait type of content where oh, they're cheating on you, you know, that kind of stuff, which is really low vibe anyway. It's really low vibe. Can't question why you attract low vibe clients when you're creating low vibe content. So think about how you can shift your content where you can be a voice, you can be an advocate for yourself, and you can be an advocate for your industry. And I promise you, people will start listening and you will feel less and less and less like an imposter. Okay. Any questions before I leave you guys off today? I wanted to see really quickly what we're going to be talking about next week. So I'll just wait for comments to come in for a moment. And then I'm going to check and see what we're doing next week. So next week, oh, no, that's the wrong Canva account. Yeah, he got really nasty with you. Oh, Diane said I had a customer on a hotline blow up on me for setting a boundary because he felt that since he was paying me, I needed to basically do whatever he says. And yeah, that's a really, really big one. So, maybe there is some content there where you're like, actually, I have bodily autonomy and I'm gonna do whatever I want. And that's another really big thing, is just because people pay you doesn't mean that they own you. That's another mindset thing that we choose to work on a lot. Okay, so ooh, yeah, next week is gonna be good. We're gonna episode 3, we're gonna talk about the paradox of money and time. We're gonna talk next week about, if you don't have a lot of time to run your business, then what can you do? What are some things that you can do in order to get your business to gain momentum and traction faster, while still maintaining your sanity, So we're going to talk about that, time or money, because in business, pretty much everything costs either time or money. Sometimes it costs both. And how much is your time worth? And specifically, we're going to talk about ads too. So I know a lot of you are interested in ads, and I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about like my theory about how I run ads, why I run ads, what content I run ads with, and what my goal with running ads is, and also what is my budget and what does that actually get me. So we're going to talk numbers. Yeah, for sure, Janie. You have minimal time for sure. All right, you guys, I hope you have an amazing rest of your Monday. Have a good week, and I'll see you next Monday.